this should.
A very good evening to you, Zimbabwe, and this is Studio 7. And tonight on Live Talk, we are, of course, going to talk about the radio. But, of course, Gibbs, it's Friday, the 13th, 2015. Hope we are not being spooked.
Yes, we are not being spooked at all, but we never know. Friday the 13th.
Yes.
Happens once in a while. To join the discussion, phone us directly at this number, 001-202-619-2077, and we'll call you back.
And of course, Live Talk goes out to Zimbabwe on our 919 medium wave frequency and on the 4930-5940 and 15455 kilohertz shortwave, Monday through Friday at 8:30 p.m.
On the internet, you can find us at www.voazimbabwe.com, www.voandebele.com, and www.voashona.com.
We as youth, we kindly ask that the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation and the radio stations focus on the youths, that they also get lessons from the radio, culturally, morally, as well as educationally through teachers which may sign up to conduct their lessons over the air, and children to have an open platform which they respond to.
Kungoti vangodzera programs anokurudzira vechidiki maybe zvakafanana nezvemageu chaiyo nyaya because nyaya dzerefu dziri kungoramba dzichikwira handiti sazvinoita sekuti maybe kune vamwe vasati vanyatsoziva zvokuti vabereki vavo pamwe vanogara vega saka maybe vabereki vavo vanenge vasina munhu wekuvaudza saka mukaramba muchingokurudzira maprograms.
Into ze-technology sezenze ukuthi i-radio nangwayo akusadingeki ukuthi ube lesigxingi se-radio. I-radio sulakho ukuyithola usebenzisa ifoni. Konke lokho sokumele kubuye kwenziwe luhlangothi olunye. Uzathola ukuthi eZimbabwe okwe-cellphone kukhangelwa ngenye inhlanganiso kahulumende, okokusakaza kukhangelwe ngenye inhlanganiso kahulumende.
Once again, thanks for joining us, and this is Studio 7 Live Talk. And tonight on Live Talk, of course, we are talking about the World Radio Day.
The World Today commemorated the 4th annual World Radio Day. This year's theme is youth and radio, and how young people can be better represented through the most powerful medium of communication.
In a statement released today, Mr. Zimbabwe said, quote, critical to Zimbabwe is the fact that the day comes at a time when the country is still to implement the three-tier broadcasting system by calling for applications for licenses for community radio stations. This day should therefore spur the government into action, given the potential of community radio in raising awareness and providing solutions to community problems that range from education, hygiene, sanitation, infrastructure development, agriculture, and local governance, especially in marginalized remote areas. Gibbs.
What do you think about this issue? If you wish to join the show right now, phone us directly at this number, 001-202-619-2077, and we'll call you back. That number again, 001-202-619-2077. Yeah, us time for it.
Honguka ama wadiwa nasi tunauti tinge tichitarisa nezve zuva rekucherechedzwa kwekukosha kwakaita iko maredio muupenyu hwevanhu. Tinoziva tese kuti munyika zhinji dzemuAfrica tichisanganisa Zimbabwe, radio yakakosha zvikuru nekuti kazhinji vanhu vanosvika iwo zvikamu makumi masere kubva muzana kana kuti 80% ndo vanoteerera radio. Hongu ma-TV ari kuuya akati wandei, asi izvi hazvikunde vanhu vanenge vachiteerera radio, nekudaro radio inenge yakakosha. Dingindira regore rino riri kutarisa nyaya yekuti vechidiki vangaite sei kuti vange vachipindawo munyaya dzekuti mazwi avo anga achinzwikwa ivo panhepfenyuro. Gibbs.
Yebo kambe zulu kandawo lingathola njani thina ngapha kayi no blessings siyaphila sibili. Esikhuluma ngakho ke lamhlanje i-World Radio Day sizwile ke abaningi bekhuluma ngakho khona ngale ke eZimbabwe bekulo mkhankaso sibile kwathi khona kwathi senziwa ngabanye labo abalandela khonokho ke okusakaza. Siyakwazi ke ukuthi imisakazo iqhakathekile kakhulu not kuphela kwele Zimbabwe but emhlabeni wonke nje jikelele. Abantu abaningi Blessing singathi ke 80% abantu balalela iradio, ama-newspaper kuzobuya ama-TV ngokunye lokho. Sikhuluma kakhulu ngele Zimbabwe. Bese kubuya ke nxa usukhangela iradio phela kumbe ngithi umsakazo awula lokho kuthiwa ngama-barrier ukuthi ukuthenga kwangikhona ufike uthenge khonapho usuqhuba ususiyazibalela akwenziwa njalo. So iradio uyathi useBotswana ungayelalela eStudio 7 khathesi ke isibroadcaster sase-Washington DC kodwa umuntu uyenelisa ukuthi enzeni alalele ke iradio yethu. Kube sokubuya ke nxa sesikhangela khonokho ke okwemsakazo umuntu angazenzela futhi akufunayo la ku-internet uyazivulela okwakho okufunayo ulalele, kumbe nxa ufuna ukulalela wedwa uyakwanisa ukuthi ulalele wedwa. So ke kuqakathekile kakhulu njalo ke lo nyaka okungani kuyaqakathekiswa yikuthi bakhangela ngabasakhulayo ukuthi abasakhulayo kambe bangasebenzisa njani umsakazo lowo ukwenza ukuthi labo bethuthuke. Khulumani Sizwe Zulu nxa ukuthi lifuna ukungena kathesi ke kumsakazo nasi inombolo 001 202 619 2077. Asishayini Sizwe.
Of course, to commemorate this and to put value on the youths, we now have a youth program every Tuesday, right? The connection.
Connection. I-connection yankona silaba sakhulayo phela sile youth policy lathi. Phela uyabona ngona sungani sugugaguga mbijana. Sezimhlophe phela. Lami ngapha sezimhlophe. So youth program yethu njani? Unotatenda bese kubuya lo ntunga. Ngabe silalele bobabili yibo phela abasakhulayo ama-youth phela mfowethu. So lingene kuprogram yabo Tuesday ngolwesibili silabo abasakhulayo phela.
Hongu vateereri tida kukurangarisira kuti nechipiri chega chega mune makunzwa chirongwa che-The Connection chakanangana nevechidiki, nekudaro hapana zvekuzoti aiwa vechidiki havana izwi ravo. Pendai muchirongwa ichi musi wechipiri wega wega panenge paina Tatenda naNtungamili Nkomo, Tatenda Gumbo naNtungamili Nkomo. I think we have our guest lined up. First, we have Mr. John Masuku. He's a radio personality, veteran broadcaster. Mr. Masuku, good evening.
Good evening, Blessing.
And we also have our second guest, that is Mr. Hlahla Ngwenya, Misa Zimbabwe director. Mr. Ngwenya, good evening.
Good evening, Blessing. How are you?
Thank you so much, gentleman. Gibbs, you can start the ball rolling.
Yes, let's start with you, Mr. Ngwenya. We know that we are actually commemorating this day in Zimbabwe. How did you mark it?
Come again?
You were commemorating World Radio Day. Were there any activities of note today in Zimbabwe?
Yes, there were quite a number of activities. I mean, you would know that I think Zimbabwe is one of the countries in Southern Africa that has quite a number of organizations that are involved in media freedom lobby work. And so MISA did not have a big event, but we were quite visible online, that is through Twitter, our website, and so forth. We also had ZACRAS, the Zimbabwe Association of Community Radios, and so on, also holding their own events in the country. So it was quite a busy day for those that cherish media freedom and radio as a medium of communication. One of the national radios, that is ZFM, also was live tweeting and live feeds throughout the day, quoting media people, quoting some journalists to also express and propagate their own opinions and views around the importance of radio. So, yeah, it was quite visible. It was on the map.
Mr. Masuku?
Yes.
Let's talk about the expansion of radio in Zimbabwe. Are you happy with what Zimbabwe has achieved from 1980 in terms of ensuring that there's growth in this sector?
No, I'm not particularly happy about that because the expansion has been very slow. One would have thought by this time would be having a lot of radio stations, that is following the three-tier broadcasting model where course, we have the public broadcaster, that's fine, which should actually act like a true public broadcaster and not a state broadcaster. Commercial stations, yes, we've had 2 being licensed, and then the local commercial have taken quite a long time. Licenses or license applications were called for last year, and it has taken a long time for the results to be announced so that we move ahead. And now, as for community radios, we've had a lot of promises that there should be community radios. Actually, it was promised by the end of last year, and right until now, there is no light at the end of the tunnel. And yet, when we compare with other neighboring countries like South Africa and Zambia and Malawi and even Mozambique, where we sometimes visit, there is a flourishing of these stations, especially community radios, because they've become popular in different countries as they direct their messages to communities. So, just in short, I'm not very happy about the expansion, about the growth. I think there is room for improvement, and I think we could have done much better. Progress is rather slow.
Thank you so much. And it's true, because I think it's clear that radio pluralism came very late in most parts of Africa with like before 1987. There were only 5 or 6 privately owned radio stations and on the entire continent, that is in Gambia, South Africa, Swaziland, and Liberia. So it is a big problem, Gibbs.
Inkinga sibili nkalata ngoba nxa usukhangela ke ezikuzwekazi le Africa ikakhulu ku Southern Africa company kukhanya ngazani ke amazwe angalama community radio stations angu-2 mabili Zimbabwe leSwaziland.
Yeah.
So ukuthi kwenziwa kuyini konoko sizezutuma suku lo baba Ngwenya basitshelani. Ye ngithathe ke umnumzana uDishoni ose South Africa. Baba Dishoni kunjani? Uconnecting wena baba Dishoni?
Yeah, ngkhona.
Ye kunjani Dishoni?
Siyaphila njani baba?
Hayi siphile kakhulu. Ungabuka ngkhona khona eGoli.
NgiseJobe.
Ye akutsho baba ungathini ngalokho?
Yabona kuma station lokwelilakho lapho esilakho ekhaya vela sikufuni. And vela so safa futhi sakufuna nanini. Sifuna sibe lesethi sindebele 24 hours sodwa. Lestonga 24 hours sodwa. Lesikhalanga 24 hours sodwa. Lesilungu sodwa. Leshona sodwa. Wonke ama-languages lokho abasinikeza khona kungcolile vela sikufuni asoke saba sakufuna noma sokuthena.
Kodwa ubona ngazani ke ye mnumzana Dishoni kungenziwani ukuthi kugcine kulemsakazo ethandwa ngabantu kumbe ngithi imsakazo yabantu?
Ipati esilalo ukuthi ndakhulumela kithi thina lapha eMathebeleland asimelwanga eParliament since 1980 akulabantu abasikhulumelayo sifaka amavote kuma-dustbin ngabe silabantu abasikabe yale bethi lokhu asikufuni kungcolile lokhu asikufuni kungcolile manje bafika bequthe belalele bedithethwe ngabanye abantu vele kunzima unless engxenye kuze kungena izaphu le-devolution of power sisifakele engxenye kuzaba ngcono. Lokho kukhona mbona sile enye 30 years vele into engake yafa sinceda buza futhi.
Yeah, so masukhangeleke abantu bangaphiwa imsakazo yabo baba Dishoni kabasoze benze ongafunwa lelizwe.
Ilizwe likabani ilizwe lengelethu ozabe ngakufuna ngubani ufuna ukuthi uyenze ukufunwa ngubani wena ngubani in the first place. Engizina ngitshelwa ngubani ukuthi ngenze 1 2 3 ungubani wena ozangitshela ukuthi khuluma lokhu chiye lokhu ufishani ikwini okubi mangikhuluma lawo ingazini ngawe nokubi angazi lutho mina ngithini nginje ozabe yala ukuthi sikhulume osifike sikukhulume ufishani wenzani ebantwini buza futhi.
So ke ungamtshelani uhulumende weZimbabwe ngokuthi kube lemsakazo eminingi ungapho suthini khona?
Uhulumende lo 1980 usincindezele kakhulu vele asimfuni lamanje singaphandle kwelizwe sifuna istation sethu esindebele 24 hours sodwa esesitonga sodwa esesikhalanga sodwa yonke indimi izwe zodwa and sicela ukuthi futhi simele ngomunye umuntu evela obhinga ovela ePlambe ovela kwenye ike sibone ukuthi siyehluleka kuphi ke sitshintshane ngoba lokho kukhona since 1980 akusoze kwafa kwasinceda ngalutho akukwazi kusincede ngalutho futhi.
Awuboni ke mnumzana Dishoni sibongile kakhulu ube lempela viki enhle baba.
Ngiyabonga.
Yeah, so according to Mr. Tishoni, you know, he says these useless stations that they listen to in Zimbabwe are not good at all. He says what is needed are different stations. Tonga, Ndebele, Shona, maybe up to 16 of those languages that are recognized in the country. So he says the tragedy is the government that is in power, you know. It has done nothing for the people since 1980, according to him. So he says, you know, there's no good representation in parliament by people who go from, let's say, Matabeleland to parliament, and they say nothing. They always agree to everything. So he's not happy about that. And he says radio should not be controlled. Who has to control it? It's the people.
Indeed. Tine mumwe muteereri parunhare mukoma Bernard kuBotswana makadii?
Wakadi blessing good.
Aiwa isu tiri nani zvedu. Tipewo pfungwa dzenyu panyaya dzeredhiyo idzi. Mungati munofara here imi nenhefenyuro dzeredhiyo dziriko kuBotswana? Regai timbotange neikoko.
YekuBotswana?
Ehe.
Aiwa indofara chaizvo nozoitika kuno Botswana ini.
Zvakasiyana sei nekuZimbabwe?
Zvakasiyana. Unoona kuno kublessing chero hurumende fanika ukasana vana RB2 nana RB1. Vanotori ma-state controlled radios but havati zvazokunzi munotaura izvi hamutaurisi. Unotiwa imwe nhamba achitotaura chitochoropodza munhu kana kuti vice president, asi ari ma-state controlled radio. Zvasiyana kuZimbabwe kuti kuZimbabwe kunongotaurwa zvakangonaka chete, kwakungotaurwa zvinhu zvesingo zvenhema zvakanaka zvekuti ndezvehurumende yakanaka. Ende yetu ufaine kuti the very government blessing vanotadza ngoti vatsvage ma-independent radio ma-independent broadcasters. Ukatafa nzira chadzadza kuti vanhu vadza kwavanobva vakumisa vachiinda kuzvipatara hakuna nzira. Vana vanobva kuti vadze kuchikoro vachiinda kudzimba dzavo vanovharirwa nzizi dzikazara havachaendi kumba kuti havachaendi kuchikoro. Saka ufainde kuti kunoBotswana zvinhu zvakasiyana blessing, zvinhu zviri smart. Hakuna radio station inenzi ino ngaitaure zvakati ngaisataura zvakati. Zvakatosiyana zvachose. Ukangoona kona kutoma madetectors ekuti zvakati hazidiwe tataura izvi vanenge zvacherwa nemukomana angataura Ndebele ndobva Ndebele. Munhu anozouya otiye kana mapowa radio station taura izvi wosiya izvi anenge ada kuti utaurei. Saka izvozvo ndezvemadictators izvezvezvi zvakatosiyana kuno Botswana. kuBotswana kuri smart blessing. Ukangoti Botswana haungadefana neveZimbabwe, zvakatosiyana by far. Asi ndechimwe chikumbiro blessing. Pamakataura nenyaya yeumwe murume ari kuHarare ane kenza, ndaizama kupinda pachirongwa kubva ndaizama kupinda pachirongwa ndichingokundikana kuti ndikutaurirei kuti vape nhamba yangu, then inini ndovondikontakta. Ndine umwe munhu futi anga ari kuUK andakadobatsira kona atori right akadobvisa kubasa. Ini handisi ndorapa, ndine munhu andoziva anorapa. Ini handidi kana sendi. I just want kuti ndingomuita tsuru zvakabatsirikana.
Aiwa.
Ndaikumbira kuti kana zvaita asazopa demanipawo nhamba demamupa munhu yenhamba iye ari kuHarare. Kamondivati mukwanisa kunditexta nhamba dzake then ndomukontakta inini. Hamene zvamungakwanisa kuita because studio ndikatotorelayo nayo.
Aiwa, hapana chakaipa mukoma Bernard, tichakufonirai kana chirongwa chapera.
Ndinotenda blessing.
Tinotenda zvikuru. Of course, what Bernard is saying is that he is pleased with what is happening in Botswana in terms of the multiplicity of radio stations that are there, and he's saying that radio stations are free to broadcast whatever they want, as opposed to Zimbabwe where they have to toe a certain line. Gibbs.
Yes, kuye baba Masuku khona ngapho ke ukuthi kambe kwenziwa kuyini ukuthi uhulumende ngani kafuni ukuthi abantu babe nemsakazo yabo? Kuvela ngaphi khona?
Mina ngibona ngathi kwesaba umnyama ongelampisi. Kungabe kusesathi ukuthi abantu bazakhuluma abakufisayo. Okuyinto emiliyenzakale ukuthi abantu bakhululeke la uhulumende ezwe ukuthi abantu bathini. Ngoba emisakazweni lapha nxa abantu bekhuluma iziphathamandla ezitshiyeneyo kanye labezombuso elizwe babe besizwa imibono yabantu. Ngakho-ke ukuvalela abantu ukuthi bangakhulumi kuyabe kuyinto engalunganga. Kodwa-ke sekwatholakala indlela ezitshiyeneyo ezokukhulumisana njengoba namhlanje sekule incingo lezi ezabomakhalekhukhwini sekulama-internet sekulani yebo kambe amazwi ayahamba ngokuphangisa into enzakala khathesi nje yabe sifikile sivelela emelika sivelela ngaphi ngiyakhumbula esikhathini esedluleyo umongameli welizwe esiwa e-airport mina ngakubona sekuvela kwelinye ilizwe kodwa mina ngikhona apha eZimbabwe khonokho nje kusanda kwenzeka yiko-ke amazwi ungeke wawafihla kodwa kuyabe kukuhle nje ukuthi kube sobala kuvuleke abantu bazikhulumele nje bekhululekile kule mithetho yelizwe babadube yenza ukuthi nxa ukhuluma okungayisikho okungekho emthethweni welizwe uyabotshwa ngakho abantu beZimbabwe ngabantu abakhulileyo abantu ababumbekileyo abalesimilo abangaphonga ukukhuluma izinto ezingelamsebenzi emsakazweni ngakho angiboni ukuthi kwenokwesaba kanje yikupho kwesaba ukwenzela ukuthi abantu bonke bathintelwe emsakazweni munye ukwenzela ukuthi nxa kukhulunywa ngezombangazwe abantu babe lengqondo yenye kodwa abantu sebehlakaniphile abantu bayathola ingqondo endaweni ezitshiyeneyo ungeke wabavimbela lanxa usufisa.
So according to Mr. Masuku, the reason why the government is failing to, register or to give licenses to radio stations is just fear of the unknown. He says, Zimbabweans are law-abiding citizens. And at the end of the day, if somebody says something wrong, let's say on radio, the government can, police can arrest that kind of person. So he says, these days, excuse me, there's social media. So that social media plays a very key role in disseminating information. And he said, for example, when the president fell at the airport recently, he got the news from outside the country instead of inside the country, meaning that, you cannot control the way information is flowing. I think he's got a point there.
Indeed, and the world is fast becoming a global village. But just looking at radios in Africa, one can actually categorize them into five when we talk about independent radio stations. First, of course, there are commercial radio stations that rely on advertisements, and you also have Christian radio stations controlled, for example, by the Roman Catholic Church, the Anglican, and then, of course, you have community radio stations that focus on a particular community. These are the fastest growing types of radio stations in Africa. Then number 4, you have what are called factional radio stations. These are usually in war-torn countries. You are talking about Somalia, where a certain ethnic group may want to promote its own interests. But the most notorious one was in Rwanda, Gibbs, in 1994. Of course, this actually led to the genocide when one ethnic group was using the radio to promote this tribalism and hatred. And of course, to counter that, the last category is what is called humanitarian radio, of course, usually run by organizations such as the United Nations to make sure that these wars do not persist. But talking about these so-called factional radio stations, I think the government has cited them a lot to say this is why they are not issuing out licenses. Let's bring in Mr. Ngwenya. Mr. Ngwenya, the fears by the government justified that if you allow a lot of private players to come into the broadcasting industry, they might actually end up promoting factionalism?
They're actually not justified. I think it depends on which side of the coin you are on. If it's about factionalism, we know that language of factionalism. We know the party that talks about factionalism at the moment and so forth. But in a democracy, factionalism is healthy. Factionalism is all about divergent views. Factionalism is about contestation of ideas and opinion. So for any government to say we are afraid of factionalism means that it's a paranoia government, it's a government that is afraid of views from the people, it's a government that cannot withstand criticism and scrutiny, it's a government that cannot allow people to express themselves and propagate their own views about how things are, about issues that affect their lives. So in a way, it's a flimsy excuse as far as I can see it myself. You need a government that would stand the pressures from the citizens themselves. You need a government that can adequately explain issues to citizens if it has nothing to hide. So there is no excuse for curtailing citizens' rights to express themselves apart from the fact that whoever is curtailing or eroding that right is afraid of the truth. If you cannot be afraid of the truth and can withstand the challenges of the truth, there's no reason why you should be afraid of citizen criticism. You should be able to stand before citizens and say, this is wrong, this is right, yes, I agree with you, or I disagree with you in an open, transparent manner. So anyone who's afraid of anyone expressing their opinion is hiding something. I mean, it's illogical. Anyone, every citizen under this world, in this universe, would say that and come to that conclusion. There is no way you can be afraid of the truth unless you're hiding something.
Interesting. The truth shall set us free. But of course, Mr. Ngwenya is right. There has been a reluctance, not only in Zimbabwe, but in most African countries, to allow people to come into the radio sector. But for newspapers, there have been, many independent players or independent newspapers that are in circulation. But radio remains the most important medium of communication in Africa. And many governments still want to control it.
Yeah. So now, let's talk a bit about public service broadcasting, Mr. Masu. I'll read something here, according to UNESCO. Public service broadcasting is broadcasting made, financed, and controlled by the public for the public. It is neither commercial nor state-owned, free from political interference and pressure from commercial forces. Is there any such thing in Zim?
No, our public broadcaster has become a state broadcaster, so much that you don't hear all those different voices that you are talking about. And when we pay our taxes, as the public, and some of which taxes finance the public broadcaster, we do that on a non-partisan basis. And then we also expect that even programming will be balanced so that us as listeners as well as viewers, we make decisions out of a variety and balanced programming that will be broadcast. But that is not the kind of programming that you get on the state-controlled Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation, because you only hear voices from one party, or voices that are critical, you will not hear them at all. At times we know that they are interviewed in different programs, but because what they have said is something that those who are the gatekeepers don't want to go into the public domain, they will therefore not be able to air them, to broadcast them on air. So someone will say, but I was interviewed this afternoon and I don't see myself in that interview, or what has been put there is something that they use negatively in order to portray you in bad light, like what we've seen happening to different politicians in this country, where you are there, they're addressing a rally or they're addressing a meeting, and when you watch the report in the evening, it's a distortion of facts. So that does not portray a public broadcaster. And I've had the opportunity of studying public broadcasting, and indeed some of the things that I've uncovered are very unfair to the public, because when the public pays their taxes, they want to hear a variety of things and make their own decisions. They're not going to allow someone to make decisions for them. So, yes, public broadcasting is still in a pipe dream.
Thank you so much, Gibbs.
Yes, lo mnumzana ke unkosi yabo ose South Africa. Baba nkosi yabo kunjani?
Ngiyaphila mina kunjani mnumzana?
Mphile mnumzana, ungapha khona khona?
Ngisegolile kuzonda.
Ye, ungathini ke kodwa lo?
Ngiye mphawule ngalo baba uthi igovernment itshona
bamba khonapho ke ubambe khonapho ngayinda nkosi yabo
ingapromote i-factionalism.
Nkosi yabo bamba khonapho ngayikhatshana. Siyaphenduka kantesi usinike imizuzwana nje 1 minute.
Of course, Mr. Masuku and Mr. Ngwenya, please do stay on the line. And unfortunately for our radio listeners, it ends here. But we are streaming live. So go to www.voazimbabwe.com and press on LiveTalk. This is Blessing Zulu.
And I'm Gibbs Dube saying stay tuned to Zimbabwe.
for those of you who are just joining us, good evening, and this is Studio 7 Live Talk. And tonight on Live Talk, we are talking about the World Radio Day. Of course, as you know, the radio is the most important medium of communication in Africa. In terms of all the other mediums of communication, it reaches about 80% of the population. Therefore, it is very, very important. Gibbs.
And our guest tonight, Mr. John Masuku, who is a radio personality, and Mr. Ntlantla, Mr. Director. If you wish to join the show right now, phone us directly at this number, 001-202-619-2077. That number again, 001-202-619-2077. You can also send us a message on WhatsApp. Our number is 1-202-465-0318. Yeah, icingweni lapha besinomnumzana ke unkosi yabo. Baba nkosi yabo uyangizwa?
Yebo ngiyakuzwa.
Yeah, kubeka baba usathi unjani umsakazo khuluma ngakho ba.
Bengithi ngiphawule lapha kuwakhulunywa ngomunye ubaba lapha ethe igovernment ithi yesaba ukuthi iza promoter mhlawumbe i-factionalism. Ayikho indawo le ngamanga aluhlaza tshoko. Into ekhona nje abafuni ukuthi thina nje abantu besindebeleni sikhululeke sikhulume iqiniso ngesukufuna bafuna njalo nje kube khona ngaleshoneni kube kuthiwa indaba zeshona eziziqalayo kwawabanga ngapha eSouth Africa sile 11 languages wonke ama-languages alemsakazo wabo okhuluma ngolimi lwabo bekhululekile. Why kungala factionalism? Amazulu esemazulwini, amavenda esemazulu. Why eZimbabwe kungenzakala? Bayakwazi ukuthi bafuna ukuthi be one language dominance yamashona, sibe lenhlelo sithone silalele inhlelo ezi2, sithone sizumculo wabo bepromotana kube yibo bodwa. Lathi sifuna owethu ezindebile ukuze sizwakale sikhulume njalo sindebele, singafakela umuntu ongasazi isindebele abalokhu amoshi isindebele silokhu esilalele thina. Akulanto singayikhuluma. Besithe ukuthi asifundanga. Yebo asifundanga kodwa sifuna ukukhuluma ngaleso limi lesindebele esilwazi ilimi lwabomama bethu. Singasheyi sibone ukuthi i-factionalism yakho izaba khona yini. Ayikho le ndaba ukubavika nje ngento engekho nje. Umsangano nje abasitshela bona abantu laba bakhuluma ukuthi imsakazo yenzeki. Ngaphi yenzakala njalo eSouth Africa?
Yes, siyakwazi ukuthi kule eMontrose khona ngale kobulawayo. Kukhona lapha abasaza khona ngesintu. So ke ungathi nxa ulalele khona kwena wena ukuzwa njani?
Ya mina lapha ngisalaleli ngoba ngilalele inhlelo ezi2 futhi njalo abantu bakhona mhlawumbe kungasibo kungabantu ebeshoneni ababuya bezefundela isindebele nje akukhulumi sometimes isindebele esiqondile. Yebo inhlelo ezi2 ilanga lonke. Why nga broadcast 24 vele kushone kuzindaba zesindebele nje ucace nje lamavende ethole sawo amakhala angathole sawo nje kucace nje. Njengangapha eSouth Africa ikhona ngapha eSouth Africa khuluma into esiyaziyo ngapha eSouth Africa silalela kanjalo ngapha. Siyazikhethela ufuna nxa ufuna isivendi ayesivendeni nxa ufunani isilungu yesilungwini akula mix. Why bona wafuna imix?
Akukhulume nohulumende phela. Khuluma nohulumende lapha siyakwazi balalele. Batshela.
Ya uhulumende isikuthi bayazi bona ukuthi bavikana. Anibavika nje ukuthi vele amandebele mele bephansi lokhu bethu abafundanga. Ayikho indaba abakhulule nje umsakazo sibonene ukuthi sizohluleka noma singasazi isilungu mhlawumbe becabanga sizokhuluma ngolimi lwethu lesindebele sifundisana isindebele esiqondile labo bekhulume ngeshona ngale kungabi lelinye language.
Yes, siyabonga kakhulu ke inkosi yabo khona ngapho ke eJozi ungathina lokusasa baba.
Ngiyabonga la.
Yeah, so according to Mr. Nkosiabo, you know, he says it's not true that maybe the government doesn't want to register, you know, these radio stations because of fears of some military action or factionalism in the country, whatever. So he says, you know, they don't want to tell the truth. So the truth is they don't want to use his language. He's a Ndebele speaker. He says they hate Ndebele people. That's a basic rule, according to him. So he says there's need to have various languages being broadcast in various stations. Period. That's what he likes.
Though I don't agree with him there. I think Shona and Debele actually dominate. I think it's other minority languages.
So you are saying let's have
suffering.
Yeah, you are saying let's have a Debele station, Shona station, a Kalanga station, Venda station, and different languages. That's it.
Vamasuku munoti kudii nezviri kutaurwa nemuteereri?
Hongu zvekuva nenhepfenyuro dzematunhu akasiyana-siyana uyezve kuchishandiswa ndimi dzemuno muZimbabwe chinhu chakanaka chinokurudzirwa uyezve chichikurudzirwa kuitira kuti vanhu vave nekudada nenyika yavo yekuti hongu inini ndakazvarwa chichitaura chitonga kana kuti chivenda uyezve ndakasununguka munyika yandakazvarirwa kuti ndinge ndichikwanisa kuchitaura. Saka zvinhu zvakadaro kazhinji zvinowanzobuda pachena kana nhepfenyuro iri yenharaunda inotaura rurimi rworwo ichinge ichizvibudisa. Asi zvavataura zvekusouth Africa zvavanozoita nezvakaitika zvekuti kwane masatellite, nyangwe chiteshi chiri chenharaunda iyoyo chaakukwanisa kubatwa kana muno muZimbabwe nenzira dzakasiyana-siyana nekumwe kwakasiyana-siyana nevanenge vachida kuramba vachingoteerera rurimi irworwo, asi zvirongwa zvabva mudunhu iroro kana kuti munzvimbo iyoyo inotaurwa rurimi rwakati kuti. Ndosaka munomu tichikwanisa kubata masiteshi anobva waZulu Natal, anobva kupi nekupi, asi tichiwabata pasatellite nezvimwe zvakadaro. Asi unozongofarira chiteshi chakadaro nokuti chiri kutepfenyura zvinhu zvaunonzwisisa, zvinhu zvedunhu dzimweni dzenguva kwawakabva. Sezvakaita Blessing uri kuAmerica, ukangonzwa panotaurwa nezvekumusha zvekuZimbabwe, unobva wada kumira ikoko kuAmerica, woda kunyatsoteerera kuti chii chiri kumboitika. Inga izvi ndezvekwedu, ndafara chaizvo kuti ndazviwana zvichiitika muno muNew York kana muWashington.
Aiwa, ichokwadi chaicho Vamasuku. Gibbs.
So there's this basic thing. When you go to a journalism school, Mr. Nhlanhla, the thing is, you are told by a lecturer, the media is there to educate, entertain, and to inform. So now, if you look at public service broadcasting, services, when you look at Zimbabwe, are they designed for that purpose? Like educating the public, entertaining the public, and informing the public, and let alone promoting democracy?
Well, it depends on what kind of entertainment you want. I mean, if you think Kongonya satisfies you, yeah, that's the kind of entertainment you would say it's entertaining. If you think like Ondo Eminda songs are the sort of entertainment an individual should be subjected to, some people are actually ecstatic about ZPC because they believe, when we look at these things, let us not disregard other components of Zimbabwean society, because there are people who love what is happening. But the majority, let's say the majority of Zimbabweans don't like what's happening. But there are people who like what is happening, but those constitute a small majority. So yes, there are people who believe that the time-varied role of the media is being served by ZPC. If you are a ZANU-PF person and you like hearing propaganda and so forth and all those things, you would think that ZPC is serving everything. But, we have several parties in this country, and some people don't even like what is happening through that channel, which is a public service broadcaster. So, yes, but let me come to the majority now and where we stand as Mr. Zimbabwean people who fight for media freedom in this country. What is happening with our public broadcaster is tragedy. It's abuse of the majority of Zimbabweans. I mean, a public broadcaster should reflect all shades of Zimbabwean opinion, but I doubt if there's any single Zimbabwean who can stand here in this country and say that's the case. It's not the case, and everyone knows that it's not true. So what we are saying is, let us liberate that space, not only the public broadcasting space, let us liberate everything around broadcasting. Let us democratize it. There are norms and principles that we can actually follow. We are not going to reinvent the wheel. Everything has been set and so forth. Let us just adhere to the principles and values that are contained in instruments that we have all, as a nation represented by those that are in power, appended our signatures to. So, I mean, I'm talking about the African Charter on Broadcasting. It's clear on what we should do as a nation and so forth. I'm not going to use other instruments that are international, European, and so forth, because other people are quite allergic to those. But let us use the ones that they claim to be adhering to, the Pan-African instruments. None of them have been implemented to the dot in this country. So we are saying, in terms of freedom of expression, broadcasting services, and so forth, can we be honest with ourselves? Can we live by what we have agreed to and appended our signatures to? I mean, the rest will just fit into place. So there is no neo-colonialism, imperialism about this thing. It's about us being honest with ourselves. The trouble is, you asked Mr. Masugi earlier on about African governments having public broadcasting services that are being hijacked and so forth. I mean, the issue is there is no public service government in Zimbabwe. It's all about power, nepotism, corruption, and so forth. It cuts across Africa. So when you see a medium of communication, it's not about serving the public. It's about serving your own interests and entrenching your stay in power and so forth. It's archaic. It's old. It's dictatorial and so forth. And once we change our culture, our political culture, and to know that once you say, I want to be voted into office, I'm serving members of the public and my constituency. I want my members to engage with me through various forms of media and so forth, through radio and so on. Then I think we'll start talking. At the moment, really, the media is being used for political control and subjugation. I mean, period, across sub-Saharan Africa.
Thank you so much. Vamasuku, regai tidzoke kudingindira regore rino riri kutarisa nezvevechidiki tichitarisa nyaya dzenhepfenyuro, tichitarisa nezviri kuitika muzimbabwe. Mungati vechidiki vane izwi here munyaya dzekutepfenyura paredhiyo apa?
Pari zvino izwi richakashoshoma, richiri diki. Tingade chaizvo kuti vechidiki vange vachipinda mudzinhepfenyuro tichivanzwa vachitaura zvakasiyana-siyana, uyezve vachiita zvirongwa. Hongu zviripo, asi zvirongwa zvizhinji zvinosiya kunze vechidiki. Ndosaka vachizomhanyira kumwe kwakasiyana-siyana. Tichizovaona vachipedza nguva yavo vari paYouTube, vachipedza nguva yavo vari painternet nekumwe kwakadaro. Uyezve iwo unyanzvi, isusuwo sevashamarari takafanira kuita unyanzvi hwakadzama hwekuti tikwanise kukwezva vechidiki kuti vachiuya kudzinhepfenyuro. Nokuti kutepfenyura kwataiita makare kare, pataitepfenyura kwatisiyanei nekwazvino. Uyezve ivo vanhu vacho zvavanofarira kuita nezvavanofarira kunzwa zvatisiyanei. Saka takafanira kutsvagawo njere dzekuti tiunze zvirongwa zvavanoona kuti izvi zvirongwa zvinotunza kunhepfenyuro, vachizopedzisira vakuteerera zvinhuwo zvinovavaka zvinoita kuti vange vachisimudzira nyika yavo. Nokuti pari zvino vechidiki vaunosangana navo vazhinji vanenge vachitaura kuti havavhote, havanei nezvematongerwo enyika, asi vasingazivi kuti vari kuzvidzosera shure. Kana vachipinda mune zvematongerwo enyika vanenge vakuita zvepropaganda zviya zvavanochitaurwa navangwenya. Saka vakafanira kunge vachipindawo mune zvenhepfenyuro, uyezve kwete kungopinda vachishandiswa vachiimba nezvehondo yeminda nezvimwe zvavanochitaurwa zvakadaro, asi ngavapinde vachidzidza zvakawanda, zvingave zvemabhizimusi, zvingave zvenyika yavo, kwete zvenyika yavo zvakangorerekera kudivi rimwe chete, asi ngavanzwisise nyika yavo kubva kumativi ese, kuitira kuti vakure vachiziva, kwete kuvenga vamwe. Kwete redhiyo tishandiswe kuvenga vamwe sezvatakaona zvichiitika kuna Rwanda nemwe kwakadaro. Saka hongu mukana wechidiki uchiripo, nesuwo vashamarari ngatiedzei chaizvo nepatinogona kuti titsvage kuita zvirongwa zvinonakidza vechidiki, asi zvisiri zvemimhanzi chete, asi zviri zvemimhanzi nezvehurukuro nezvimwe zvakadaro zvinovafadza uyezve zvichivadzidzisa.
Aiwa, tinotenda Vamasuku munenge manyatsobaya dede nemukanwa. Of course, Mr. Masuku is saying that the radio the programs for the youths must actually be used to benefit them. And is seriously concerned that sometimes, or most of the time, you see that the youths are not even participating in the politics of the country, as if it does not concern them. And he's saying also that programs should not be just entertainment, but things that are important for the development of the youths. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you see they spend most of their time on YouTube, being unproductive sometimes, you know.
Yes, wewe baba Ngwenya lokho kwethu.
Yebo.
Ye, nxa sikhangele lapha baba Ngwenya abasakhulayo lemisakazo. Kwayangazani ke abasakhulayo abanengi basebenzisa ama mobile phone, umakhala ekhukhwini laba. So ubona ngani bangathiwa njani ku radio ukuze ukuthi babuye labo khonapho. Kumbe bayekelwe bokhona ngale bezenzela khonokho komakhala ekhukhwini bese ufaka i-radio phakathi. Kuhamba njani?
Inkinga ekhona esibona ngendlela esesidevelopa kanje njengabantu ukuthi lokho sehlukanisa i-radio lo makhala ekhukhwini ungavula manje umakhala ekhukhwini abantu abaningi abasemakhaya balale radio ngomakhala ekhukhwini. Yikho-ke ngisithi intsha nxa ukuthi yesebenzisa umakhala ekhukhwini i-radio ayingene kumakhala ekhukhwini ifake wonke ama-program amayelana lentsha leyo okhuluma ngayo. Yikho sikhuluma thina nxa sithi siyakhuluma abemisa sikhuluma nge-convergence ukuthi i-technology leyo khona lokwakudala kwakusenzakala kumsakazo akubuye kube kuphahla lunye kwenziwe inhlanganiso yinye ngoba i-technology esikhona i-broadcasting okwamanje sisenziwa lokho esikuthi information communication technologies ICT. Lamanje la kwamanye amazwe asethuthukile i-TV uyayibukela kumakhala ekhukhwini, i-radio yalalela kumakhala ekhukhwini. Kanti umahluko nxa ufuna ukuthi intsha ilalele i-radio lungisa inhlelo zakho zihambe kuhle, inhlanganiso zakho lama-policy zakho ayenze ukuthi lawa makhala ekhukhwini intsha yenelise ukulalela i-radio umsakazo, intsha yenelise ukubuka inteveteve lesikhuluma ngayo. Yikho zathola khona intsha.
Yeah, I think you raised very important points there. Can you just briefly sum it up in English?
No, what I was saying is, if you are talking about the youth and innovation, yes, it's true that the youth are now engrossed in ICTs, technological developments, and so forth. But my argument is, there's nothing earth-shattering about what the youth is doing, because as human beings we evolve and you adapt and adopt what is around us. The important thing is you cannot now distinguish TV or radio from the mobile phones that you said earlier on that the youth are now obsessed with. What we need to do is to leverage the mobile phone technology and ensure that the youth communicate through the mobile phone, which is their gadget, their favorable gadget. They can also access radio through the mobile phone. They can also access TV through the mobile phone. In our own context, what this calls for is a converged regulatory framework, a framework that will bring mobile phone and the mainstream traditional broadcasting framework under one roof. We now need to have a converged regulatory framework where you have mobile phone regulated by one body under one law. Zimbabwe is lagging behind on that score. Across the Southern African region, SADC, it is Zimbabwe, it is Swaziland, I think, and Botswana. No, Botswana have actually upgraded that. So what we are saying is we now need a converged regulatory framework for mobile phone and broadcasting. Because now with our mobile phones, I can watch TV, I can watch the TV news on my mobile phone. Why do we have three different regulatory frameworks? Now, if I need a license for broadcasting, I need to first of all have BAS, the Broadcasting Authority of Zimbabwe, calling for a license. I apply. BAS has to do that after getting instructions from Potras, getting a mail from Potras. After I get a license from BAS, I have to go to Zimbabwe Media Commission. Why? We need a converged regulatory framework so that the youth can leverage these technological developments, period.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ngwenya. Coming back to you, Mr. Masuku, let's talk about those who are broadcasting from outside. Is this a healthy situation for Zimbabwe?
Well, it's not supposed to be a healthy situation, but they are broadcasting out of having no choice because the airwaves are closed inside and it is taking too long to open them. And also to the listener is actually looking for these people because when he or she listens to their programs, they find them balanced. And as a result, this is why some of these stations like yourselves are being listened to by many people, because that's where people get balanced news, first-hand balanced news happening all over the country without fear or favor. You talk to ZANU-PF, you talk to MDC, you talk to Vavambo, you talk to business people who are critical of Zimaset, you talk to those who are in favor of Zimaset, you talk to all people. I've had vice presidents in programs and so forth. And that's what it should be like, even on the public broadcaster as well as the commercial broadcaster. I must say, the news stations have also, because they also want to be credible, they try by all means to also bring in different opinions, which we hope is going to be sustained in the long run. And really, when everything is equal, when airwaves are opened, people will not bother to listen to a station, using a very difficult gadget like a shortwave and so forth. But of course, you cannot run away from what Mr. Ngwenya is saying, that there is convergence and you can find stations everywhere. Like, for example, Voice of the People and other stations, Radio Voice of the People and other stations who are utilizing what is called Channel Zim, a platform that is growing, a platform that has grown from something like 0.something% to about 12% in a short space of time. Because, as was said by the director of MISA, people are there on TV. They've just finished watching a program, maybe from TV Josh, and they move across, they come across Channel Zim, and they listen to interesting programs. And even Studio 7 is available there, and they go to other programs. So these are new platforms that you cannot stop. And these are alternatives that will always find, listeners will always find in order to get information that they are failing to get very easily inside their country.
Thank you so much. Well put there, Mr. Masuku Gibbs.
Now, coming back to you, Mr. Ngwenya, what's the way forward for Zimbabwe?
Well, the way forward for Zimbabwe is for those that are holding public office, for the authorities to be honest with themselves, to say, we have a new constitutional dispensation, a constitutional dispensation that I believe all of us as Zimbabweans are cherishing, and which constitutional dispensation I believe all of us as Zimbabweans have been yearning for. We are yearning for it through our historical issues, going to war and so forth, and fighting for democracy. It's now time for those that hold office to say, can we liberate the airwaves? Can we democratize our media space? Can we allow, as the Constitution prescribes, anyone to set up their media space, of course, subjective to administrative issues, which issues should be obviously involve you having being registered and so forth. Can people be allowed to express themselves through a medium of their choice? Can citizens be allowed to access information through a media of their choice? This is what we should be doing. I mean, it nurtures democracy. It encourages democracy. It grows democracy. It grows quality leadership in this country. And I think this is the time, if we are going to say we need leadership with substance, it is the time that we liberate our media space. It is the time that we have a democratized broadcasting sector, a democratized broadcasting sector that has substance. We don't want quantitative reforms, but we want qualitative reforms. I think this is an issue that we need to engage on as Zimbabweans, and we need to reach out and have compromise and say, but internationally, this is what is happening. Regionally, this is what is happening. Why? What is wrong with us? Why are we so much afraid of free speech as a country? I mean, it boggles the mind sometimes. Why are we so much afraid of free speech if we say we are one and united as a country? Can we allow even every Jack and Jill, every citizen in this country to express themselves through a media of their choice? If it's about a newspaper, if it's through a newspaper, if it's through any radio broadcasting services, can they be given that freedom? Because the Constitution says so. These are the rights that are due to them as Zimbabweans.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ngwenya. Mr. Masuku Gibbs is asking about the way forward. We have discussed many impediments that those who want to enter into broadcasting are facing. What can be done?
I think, as has been already said, we have to open up and we have to improve on our laws. I think MISA and others have pointed out to where our laws are weak, especially the regulatory environment and this business of asking for licenses and taking 2 years before those who have been adjudicated are given results. Obviously, you don't understand all the strategies for the delaying tactics. But one thing is that most of them are political, and that should not be the case. And let's allow radio to grow. Let's allow the medium to grow. Let's learn from our neighboring countries. We are now the chairperson or the chairman of the AU. Surely we should learn from other countries that have opened up their space. And really there's nothing. People are enjoying themselves, listening to different radio stations. People are getting educated, and governments are assisting in various ways, especially when it comes to community media. You have just next door in South Africa where the Media Development and Diversity Agency, MDDA, assists various media. And at times when we go for conferences, for example, in Highway Africa, at Rhodes University, you find the Department of Communication participating fully, telling you about how they're assisting different community media, especially through MDDA, so that they get equipment, so that they get training and so forth. And we can do the same. We know there's a provision within our Broadcasting Services Act about the Broadcasting Fund to help broadcasters and so forth. But it's just on paper, and nothing has been taken up on that. And also our environment should open up in such a way that advertising from where most of the commercial radio stations, for instance, derive their existence, it has died, and even those who are broadcasting at the moment, including the public broadcaster, which also carries adverts, are struggling because of the poor advertising environment. I was reading the MISA statement for World Radio Day, where they were also asking, the regulator to define community, because we're spending most times, arguing what is a community and why are these community stations being formed by so and so. All those things are an impediment and will not grow. Let's just open up. There's nothing to be afraid of. Let's have these radio stations flourishing and let's have media growing.
Thank you so much, Gibbs.
And Masuku, how difficult is it to actually engage the government in trying to open up the airwaves right now as MISA?
Well, in terms of discussions, it may not be difficult, except that yesterday I was disappointed. I went to an occasion where Zakras was expecting the ministry to come and give public pronouncements, and I left around 8 o'clock when the guest of honor from government had not arrived, and we were expecting the minister. But in the past, he has done very well. He's come to different media groups to pronounce government policy, where we are and what we're doing. And I just wonder what became of him yesterday, because we're always waiting to hear what progress we're making with community radio. So yes, at times engagement is okay, at times it goes down, at times promises are made and they're not fulfilled. And that is the only disappointment that is there. And as the advocacy groups have always also been saying that let's also revisit our legislation to make sure that the environment is fair to everyone.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Unfortunately, time is not our best ally, and we have to end it here. And we want to take this opportunity to thank our guests this evening, Mr. John Masuku, a radio personality, Mr. Kyakyanguenya, director, Misa Zimbabwe. We also want to thank our listeners, our viewers, our callers, and those who wrote messages to us on Facebook and WhatsApp, and of course our team behind the scenes, our producers and engineers. Signing off, this is yours truly, Blessing Zulu.
And I'm Kip Stube saying have a lovely weekend and happy Valentine's Day.